Hello everyone, I'm Brandon Nesbitt.
And I'm Forrest Sun.
And on the topic of building your brand, we want to present to you guys today our personal branding workshop. So moving on to our agenda of the actual presentation, we're going to give a very quick, brief introduction as to who we are, and then dive into three main aspects of building a brand. Number one is building your resume. Number two is building out your LinkedIn. And number three is building out your email professionalism. In particular, what we're going to do is look at the aspects of how we can create the best email. Now, to give a brief overview of who we are, I'm Brandon Nesbitt on the left, and I'm your State Director of Fundraising. This is my third year in FBLA, and I've been involved in FBLA since the junior year of my high school. And one quick fun fact about me is that I love Tai Chi, which is a martial arts, as you guys know.
And my name's Forrest Sun, as you already may know. I'm the State Director of Programs. This is my first year in FBLA. This is my third year in DECA. But in kind of the stuff that I've done is, for a fun fact for me, is I played ping pong professionally when I was younger.
So moving on to our first topic is a resume. I know this is quite a dreaded phrase, but fear no more because we're gonna come and save the day with a resume workshop. So there's three main components of our first section. Number one, what is a resume? Number two, why do we need to have a resume? And number three is execution. How do we make the best resume out there? So moving on to what is a resume? A resume is basically a comprehensive document that lists out various activities that you've done throughout your academic as well as your career journey. It might include sections including to your education, your work experience, as well as any other extracurriculars, internships, or personal hobbies and interests. Now, one kind of component of the resume is the fact that as college students, what we're doing right now is that we actually have to apply to a lot of internships. And a lot of these internships require a resume. And this kind of dives into number two, which is the why behind the resume. Next slide, please. Yes. So in terms of why do we need a resume? We need to market ourselves. What we want to do is kind of take a broader approach and realize that as an applicant to any internship, you might be 1 out of 1,000 or even 10,000 students. And that is why we actually have to work on perfecting our resume to make sure that when the recruiter gets our resume, they actually read through it and have a positive impression. And kind of building on that idea, another big benefit of creating a resume is to have a master list of all the activities as well as all the extracurriculars that you're involved in, just so in the future you have a reference sheet for your personal use. Now, how do you make a good resume? There's basically two main components of how. Number one is content, and number two is format. If we look on the top left, the first main point is format. In most cases, you want your resume to be one page as well as being created in black and white font. And what you want is to have a very clean and crisp format so that any resume reader can read through it and get to the gist of that within a few seconds. The main part of actually creating a resume is actually content. And we'll dive more into this later on in the other section. But to give a brief overview, as I mentioned before, you want to have different sections laid out in your resume, including your education, work experience, any internships, extracurriculars, as well as any honors and awards. And actually, there's several resources out there, as well as free guides and templates that you can use to create your resume, including websites like Chegg, Indeed, as well as university-wide career centers. Now, moving on to a resume comparison. In order to understand how to make a good resume, we should first look at why we can avoid a poor resume. This is an example of a resume that might initially look good, but we dive deeper, we see there's actually several key weaknesses within this document. Number one here, we see a very inconsistent format. For example, if we look at the areas, for example, education and programming, it's presented in a way different from your experience, which you do not want when you have a resume. Another poor example is, for example, the layout. The qualification summary is very poorly written, as it's only one sentence and is very vague. And not only that, there's a very poor use of spacing because, as we've seen, there's a lot of open space on this resume, which is not evenly distributed. And last but not least, if you read through the individual sub-bullets, you might actually end up finding out that a lot of these sub-bullets don't include active verbs. For example, administrated, organized, manage, which actually are very important in a resume to kind of give a brief overview of what you have actually done. And to kind of recap, there's three main issues with this resume. Number one, it has very poor formatting. Number two, it has a poor description of the actual extracurriculars that the person has done. And number three, there's not uniform layout. So if we know what a poor resume looks like, how do we know what a good resume looks like? This is an example of a good resume that we pulled from a very big accounting firm, and this is actually displayed on their website. If we look at this, it has a very clean and crisp format. The name is centered on the top alongside the individual's contact information. If we move down, we see very clean details. For example, professional experience is laid out here, education is laid out here, and the bottom is other qualifications. In big contrast to the first resume, we see that the actual resume here has very strong use of active verbs to actually describe what the applicant has done and all of its internships as well as past work experiences. And to kind of give a brief overview, compared to the poor resume, this resume has very consistent formatting, a very clean and crisp layout, and a strong use of active verbs.
I would like to add also, it's probably a little hard to see the resume on, the screen here, but we'll provide a link otherwise to make sure that you guys can actually be able to reflect on those kind of verbs and those kind of formatting. For the second point, we're going to be experiencing what a LinkedIn is. And LinkedIn is very important, especially because it's going to be a reflection of your resume. A huge part of it is, connecting with other professionals, being able to, see other people, see how they're doing, check in on them, and see their professional experience, especially if you're going to hold an informational interview or really to get to know more about people within your company. So the LinkedIn really mainly has three kind of main components to it. I'm going to be teaching you how to, make your LinkedIn, whether it be, like just making it for your personal or professional reasonings. But there's three main components to it. There's going to be the title, the headliner, the experiences, the education, and the periphery that goes along with it. So basically, the LinkedIn title and headliner, I gave you guys an example of what a headshot should look like, but it'll be in circular form when it's on your LinkedIn. But there should be a picture, the picture should be centered, it should be focused on you, and you should be wearing professional attire. In this one, I'm wearing a polo shirt, but it's still professional, qualified as professional attire. It's a little laid back. You might want to prefer maybe something in a suit, but anything that's clear is in professional attire and is in headshot form should be okay. Where do you get this picture? So usually a lot of clubs at your schools will hold headshot days, and senior photos sometimes people use, but you would prefer to use headshots specific to jobs because those are usually more well lighted. And this is how professionals will recognize your face, whether it be meeting them in person, meeting them at info sessions. They'll look at you and they'll be able to recognize, hey, that's your face. I know this person. So basically the LinkedIn title and headliner, basically what it would be is your name. This is how it's going to reflect for other people. Name, place of work in education, and headliner. Whenever someone's looking at your information, what will happen is the headliner will show up underneath your name. So the headliner, you want to keep it short and sweet. You want to make sure that everything within your headliner is very important and reflects who you are as of right now. So in the headliner, including things of professional importance will be major and year if desired. So for me, it's pre-commerce and economics at the University of Virginia. Scholarships or distinguishment to make sure, like for example, here at the University of Virginia, we have something called the Eccles Scholar. So you might want to include something scholar. And then current titles, so for example, what you're doing currently in terms of jobs. Club positions could be okay in this position, but anything within those kind of degrees, but you want to keep it limited to one or two because you need to know that this needs to be concise and short. And these headliners will also show up in search results and previews. So basically, if they're looking out for people in that specific professions, a lot of times professionals will look out at specific people and then they'll see related individuals, and you could be one of those related individuals. So in terms of college education, so you're going to have an education space, and this is mainly where you're going to put, your college education and your high school education. Within your college education, you want to put your intended major and minor and years. So this is how employers will potentially identify, if you're an accounting major, accounting jobs will reach out to you. If you're a blank major, specific jobs will reach out to you. In that kind of degree, and also your year is very important. There's a huge distinguishment between first, second, third, and fourth years. A lot of jobs only want to recruit third and fourth years, so if you distinguish what year you're graduating, it'll be more clear for them. In terms of activities and societies, this is very important. Enlisting what you need, what you have for your societies, what you have for your activities, what you're involved on grounds or wherever you're doing whatever work you're doing, and then miscellaneous being if you have any awards, for example, Dean's List, scholarships, and your GPA. In terms of high school education, this is less important, especially as you get deeper into your college career, but really what years you were in high school, your grades and class rigor, so stuff like GPA, unweighted and weighted GPA, there's a huge distinction because of the fact that there is some grade inflation. Your class rigor, APs, honors, and DEs, there's also IBs included. activities and societies, so same thing as last time, just any club and any role that you were in, and some miscellaneous stuff is really any awards or any other significant accomplishments in high school. So, what should go in the box of experiences? So, experiences is going to be the main and really important part of your LinkedIn. This should reflect basically your resume and what's in your experiences within your resume. So, any professional experiences such as club and experiences and volunteerism is okay, as long as you have a really high position of authority and there's an applicable experience. So in examples of maybe doing volunteerism that doesn't really have, you don't have a professional position, you're just a volunteer, you'll want to include a different section, which is volunteerism, which I'll explain in a little bit. But as long as you do have a high position or a position of authority, that's where you would want to put it. What should not go in this box? I kind of explained a little bit about it, but also educational experiences. So anything that has to do with classes in specific, you should not put it in there. Experiences that should have basically the title, basically anything that's included within the experience box should have the time that the experience occurred, the title, the position that you were in, the company that you were employed to, and the short description of each position. So each employer that's looking over it can kind of get a gauge of what you were doing. So basically the periphery that you guys have, these are these little sections underneath the education and experiences. So this will be the skills, number one, some skills that you've learned. You can put skills and people can endorse you in these skills. So you're gonna want some professionals to endorse you. There's a button to request endorsement, but any kind of relevant skills that you have, whether it be leadership, volunteerism, any other kind of relevant skills, like you could even put stuff like coding, stuff in that degree. They can be endorsed by employers and you can ask for them. In terms of volunteerism, you can add volunteering that you do if you don't have an official title. And in this case, you might want to elaborate if they're non-paid or paid. In the About section, this section is going to be just a little short paragraph about yourself. You usually want to include maybe like a contact information for yourself, maybe an email on the bottom. And for the activity, you want to put, so you have an activities page, and this activities page will basically act as like a little story on Instagram. And here you'll post, thank yous at the beginning. I recently got an internship role, so basically what I did was I posted a thank you at the beginning, my internship role, and what I'm going to be doing. And you're going to basically just put like basically a summary, and this will be like a point in your life. It'll act as a story in your lifetime.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Forrest, for that great overview of LinkedIn. Now let's shift on to the last part of our workshop, email professionalism. I'm not sure if you guys also get the chills, but whenever you have to email a professor or someone who's very high ranking at a company, you might feel a sense of unease as to how do I create the proper email. No worries, we got you right here. This right here is an example of an email format that you might want to adopt when you're emailing professionals or professors throughout your university as well as your college experience. The main thing that we have to remember with emails is that we always want to be professional as well as courteous, because emails are a great way of establishing a positive relationship with other individuals. As we see right here of our sample, the first main section of an email should always have a very proper introduction. That means we want to start off with words like dear, hello, and we don't want to start off a email with just the text. We want to have a greeting at the very beginning. The next part is that we want to use a very professional address. So depending on the person that you're talking to, you might use words like Mr., Miss, Professor, or kind of other ways that you can use to kind of distinguish the individual who you're talking to. The next main part is actually your beginning line. You might start off with a word, for example, like good afternoon, I hope this email finds you well. Kind of a nice, courteous message to kind of get the words and get the flow of the conversation going. The next main part is a bit more subtle, but it has to deal with tone. What you want to make sure is that your words are presented in a way that is courteous and polite. If you have a request, you might ask a word, for example, I will be grateful for, or I will deeply appreciate. And you never want to start off by saying a word, for example, like can you, do you, like making a demand. What you want to do is actually find a way to make it courteous so that the other side can see that you're being grateful for their time. The last part, which is really important, is the conclusion. When you finish an email, what kind of tip I like to give is that you might have a closing line, for example, I like to stay in touch, have a great day, thank you again, and then you can end off with your salutation, for example, best, sincerely, kindness regards. And for some people who have more experience, they might actually include an email signature, which is basically a few lines of text underneath your conclusion that kind of gives you more of a description as to who you are as well as ways to contact you. And this is a very clear example as to a simple and simplistic email format that you can adopt.
Something that I would like to add on to this specific point, without kind of moving on just before we move on, is something that isn't mentioned a lot in my opinion is the dear Mr. or Mrs. or Mrs. A lot of times, the marital status, if you're asking a woman, for example, would be kind of ambiguous and unclear. So oftentimes, instead of saying M/S, if you don't know, something that you might want to pick up is just MS. Or if you see, like, for example, if you have an interview with them, you really want to be attentive if they have a ring or not to kind of make that distinguishment, but you really don't want to be disrespectful in that kind of sense, and you always want to stay clear of that. But moving on, yeah, for sure. So types of networking emails that you can have. So there's going to be cold networking emails, there's going to be follow-up emails, and there's going to be following up kind of emails in terms of interviews and chats. So I want to make a distinguishment between following up cold emails and following up interviews and chats, because these two are going to really have very distinct and kind of like otherly kind of tones to them. So just for cold and regular networking emails, so if you're going to be sending, a message to someone on LinkedIn, that's limited. If you want to send an email to someone that you find the email for, these are really important kind of advice to follow. But if you want to connect with someone in a company, you should send them an email or a LinkedIn message. But the contents of the message should be just brief introduction to yourself, what interested you about them or the company, and what do you want from them in terms of make it kind of more subtle. Like, for example, things like, oh, I would love to connect with you, or don't say let's connect on Sunday or something like that. You just call it kind of following what you want to say. You want to make it more subtle and less distinct, and you want to thank them for their time, of course. But it's important to be concise and targeted. A bunch of people kind of read their messages, but they're going to ignore a lot of the messages that happen as long as they're not, pointed and direct. In terms of following up in cold emails, following up with important people is very important. So even if you don't get a response, or even if you get like an interview or a chat, you really want to make sure that you follow up, whether it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards. This huge point that I didn't include on this slideshow is actually following up and the timing of the following up. So if you get an interview or a chat, you really want to follow up within 24 to 48 hours. Oftenly what'll happen is if you follow up too late, they might forget you. If it's not an interview, if it's just regular, just an informational interview, they might forget about you. Following up, even no response should happen within 2 weeks usually, but the contents of the message should be greetings, express continued interest to connect with them, and demonstrating your true interest, because some recruiters might forget to respond to emails, and a reminder would be really helpful. So in terms of following up for interviews and chats, this is really going to be more informal, but you should still remain a tone of kind of professionalism. So the contents of the message should be just greeting them, thanking them for their time, talking about something in specific from the conversation, because you want to make sure that they know you're not just sending them like a format, you're sending them something really personalized to them, and express more thanks, just for their time, spending time with you, talking to you, and giving you their effort. But this is more of a formality. But a lot of recruiters, I've talked to a lot of people, whether it be in the recruiting center, I know a lot of recruiters myself, they really like, and they make the distinguishment between people who, send emails afterwards and don't send emails afterwards. And if you have any questions, you can really reach out to our Instagram, which is Virginia FBLA Collegiate. We'll try our best to respond as quick as possible, but we'd love to connect with you there, or if you have any information or questions about the slideshow themselves, we can answer them.
Yes, and last but not least, thank you so much for attending our personal brand workshop. We were really happy to have the chance to kind of share our opinions and our experiences with you guys. So now go out and crush it. Thank you.